The lives of Native American women before and during European colonization reveal complex roles, unexpected responsibilities, and profound respect within their societies. Indigenous cultures across North America developed unique customs around marriage, family spirituality, and power. These cultures didn't merely place women on a pedestal for reverence. They empowered them with political influence, economic control, and spiritual authority that European settlers struggled to understand. Misunderstood by outsiders, these practices provided the backbone of community life for many Native American societies. By looking more closely at these roles and traditions, we gain a glimpse into the sophisticated social structure that guided indigenous lives long before European contact and the significant ways colonialism disrupted these systems. The structural respect and authority of women across tribes. Many pre-colonial Native American societies gave women a level of autonomy and respect that shocked European colonists accustomed to rigid male-dominated structures. Women's authority was not seen as a divergence from men's power but rather a complement to it. For example, the Iroquois Confederacy, which famously inspired the Founding Fathers' vision of American democracy, positioned women in roles of political power that were unparalleled in European society. Iroquois women, particularly the clan mothers, held veto power over the selection of male leaders and could remove them from their posts if they failed to fulfill their responsibilities. This balance fostered a system where men and women worked together for the tribe's collective welfare. And this power distribution fascinated and even unnerved European visitors. The influence of women went far beyond political life. Native women were deeply involved in the religious, spiritual practices of their tribes. They served as spiritual leaders, healers, and guardians of cultural knowledge. In societies like the Hopi, women held significant authority in the conduct of religious ceremonies, carrying out rituals central to the tribe's spiritual well-being. Women practiced traditional medicine, connecting them to the health of the community. Colonists observed that Native women were often the keepers of herbal knowledge and healing techniques, skills that European society typically assigned to men. Women's access to spiritual and medicinal practices granted them a revered status, making them indispensable to their tribes. Marriage relationships and social norms. For many indigenous societies, marriage and familial structures varied widely, but there were common threads of mutual respect and responsibility. Marriage customs weren't merely contractual, they were spiritual and often reflected the tribe's relationship with nature. The marriage systems among some tribes allowed for polygamy, though monogamy was generally more common. Polygamous unions often reflected community needs rather than a man's personal desire to dominate. Women frequently had the choice to accept or reject additional wives in these arrangements, underscoring the autonomy they held. In cases where tribes faced population decline or imbalances, marriages sometimes included temporary unions where women could have children outside of traditional marriage bonds to ensure the tribe's survival. This pragmatic approach ensured continuity and was more accepting of the natural ebb and flow of relationships than European standards, which heavily stigmatized divorce or alternative marital structures. For instance, among the Tlingit people, whom Russian settlers called the Comanche, beauty and identity were intricately linked. Tlingit women wore distinctive rings, called kolushkas, in their lower lips to symbolize maturity and personal status. These rings, while startling to European settlers, were symbols of beauty and identity within the tribe. Similarly, among the Navajo, women held influence over marriage and personal decisions, selecting husbands based on a variety of traits rather than through forced arrangements. Divorce was also relatively common among the Navajo, which allowed women to exit unfulfilling marriages and preserve their autonomy. The Kigabit tribe, a unique approach to gender roles. Among the Kigabit, a lesser-known tribe, there were specific customs tied to gender and marital roles that struck European observers as unusual. Young men entering manhood were required to live temporarily with the eldest woman of the tribe, a practice intended to instill respect for women and deepen their understanding of community life. This period acted as an initiation into adulthood, where young men learned humility and patience under the guidance of elder women. The respect was mutual, but it placed women in a position of influence over the younger generation of men. In marriage kigabit, men were sometimes expected to fulfill conjugal duties at the request of women. This reversal of European norms challenged colonial views of marital relations and highlighted the complex dynamics within Native communities. If a husband attempted to shirk his responsibilities, the women of the tribe would organize to retrieve him, underscoring their authority. This act of retrieval served as a reminder of the man's obligation to the tribe's well-being, but it also reflected the societal value placed on women's needs and desires. Motherhood and the social value of family. Motherhood was regarded as the most honorable role for women across many Native tribes. Children were symbols of prosperity, and a woman's ability to bear and nurture was revered. In societies where population survival was paramount, motherhood took on both a personal and communal importance in some tribes. Women unable to conceive were considered unfortunate, though they often served as surrogate caregivers, reinforcing the tribe's family-centric structure. Marriage customs supported the flexibility of family life, with temporary unions common among certain Plains tribes. Young couples frequently cohabitated before formally committing, allowing them to end the relationship if it proved unsatisfactory. Such practices may seem progressive compared to European customs of the time, where cohabitation was frowned upon and marriage was permanent. This flexibility in relationship allowed Native American communities to foster stability and personal happiness, avoiding the stigma surrounding separation. In European cultures, warrior women and the defense of their communities. Native women were not confined to domestic roles. They actively participated in the defense of their tribes. Women like Buffalo Calf Road Woman of the Cheyenne became legends for their bravery, with her iconic battle against Custer's forces symbolizing the strength of Native women. These warrior women were not mere exceptions. They exemplified the collective responsibility of defense within Native cultures. Whether through direct combat or spiritual protection, women defended their homes and people with remarkable courage. While European societies largely excluded women from battlefields, Native women faced no such limitations. A woman who chose to fight was revered as much as any male warrior. This openness contrasted with European values, where a woman's worth was often tied to her domestic role. In Native societies, defending one's family and home was seen as an act of honor, transcending gender restrictions. Spiritual beliefs, cleanliness, and menstrual practices. In many tribes, menstruation was not viewed as a period of impurity, but rather as a sacred time. For instance, the Sioux held that women were closer to the Creator because they had the power to give life. Menstruating women were often required to observe specific rituals, such as fasting or separating from others, not because they were considered unclean, but because they were believed to be in a spiritually heightened state. During this time, women would often reside in separate lodges or perform particular ceremonies to honor their life-giving abilities. Some tribes practice strict observances regarding cleanliness around menstruating women. In the Osage tribe, men avoided close contact with menstruating women, and women were required to follow dietary restrictions during this period. These practices reflected not only respect for the power of fertility, but also an understanding of life cycles that European settlers misunderstood as backward. This separation, however, was symbolic, meant to protect both the woman and her community from potential disruption of spiritual energies. Colonial manipulation, the commodification of Native women. With the arrival of European settlers, Native women's roles began to shift. Colonists quickly recognized the influence women held within their tribes and sought to exploit it. A tragic example occurred in 1868, when George Custer's regiment took 50 Cheyenne women captive. Knowing the value these women held, the Cheyenne men reluctantly negotiated with the U.S. Army to secure their release. This incident revealed both the power Native women commanded and the ruthless tactics of colonial forces. Colonial pressures led some tribes to commodify women to survive economically. For instance, the Cree began offering their young women to settlers as temporary wives to secure trade relations. This practice marked a departure from traditional values, as colonial manipulation forced tribes into uncomfortable compromises to maintain peace and ensure survival. These marriages were rarely consensual by today's standards, reducing Native women to bargaining tools in a complex web of colonial diplomacy. Marriage as diplomacy and cultural integration. Intermarriage between settlers and Native women became a form of diplomacy, often aimed at building alliances. While some of these unions fostered understanding between cultures, many reduced Native women to intermediaries. French fur traders, for example, frequently married into tribes to gain access to trading networks. In some cases, Native women served as diplomatic figures, aiding in translation and cultural mediation. However, they rarely had the agency to reject these alliances, as their roles were tied to the tribe's survival in an increasingly hostile landscape. Conclusion: resilience, legacy, and a lasting influence. The role of Native American women in pre-colonial and colonial societies reveals a depth of resilience, strength, and adaptability. Far from being passive participants, they were central to tribal life, bridging the spiritual, social, and economic dimensions of their communities. Colonization disrupted traditional systems, pushing tribes to compromise, but the legacy of these women endures. Their history serves as a testament to the richness and strength of Native cultures that, despite attempts at suppression, remain a source of inspiration. In learning about these women's lives, we not only honor their sacrifices, but draw closer to understanding a society where women were creators, warriors, and spiritual leaders. A society that challenges contemporary narratives and provides a model of strength, balance, and respect. If these stories resonate with you, join us on our channel as we continue to explore the deep, untold histories of Native cultures.